If you're curious to hear a little music from our guest Carla Lucero, who we spoke to in our most recent episode, check out E4TT's annual concert of music by women and non-binary composers, Midnight Serenades, on January 25th. Welcome to For Good Measure, an interview series celebrating diverse composers and other creative artists, sponsored by a grant from the California Arts Council. I'm Nanette McGuinness, Artistic Executive Director of Ensemble for these times. In this week's episode, we continue our conversation with Angélica Negrón, who we spoke to in November 2021. E4TT's concert on January 29, 2022 includes your wonderfully melancholy Sueño Recurrente. Can you tell us about the piece and what inspired you to write it?
Sueño Recurrente is a piece that I wrote a long time ago. It's, if not my first, my second piece that I ever wrote. It's very influenced by Satie. I'm a huge fan, and Satie was one of those composers that really inspired me. This kind of very, very unapologetic simplicity, while at the same time having a sense of irreverence and at the same time being incredibly meaningful. Just, I don't know how he does it. But yeah, Sueño Recurrente is very much inspired by Satie and also by recurrent dreams I was having at that time. I kept dreaming about these cars that were flying, and I would think of them as ghost cars. I really don't know what that means, but just this thing that keeps coming back in your dreams, and then you try to make some sense of it, but maybe that's not what it wants. It just exists, and it's an image that stays with you.
You've said artists of color have been ready for a long time for the conversation to get past justifying why we deserve a seat at the table. Now a lot of the conversations are at a deeper level when we're lucky, and we get to have conversations about how structurally we can also be involved so that the change really starts happening. That's exciting. Can you talk more about this?
I think I'm looking forward to the conversation moving forward in a way that is more connected to sustainability and support and community. And especially now thinking about a lot of artists of color getting more commissions and more performances and more works, because since last year's racial uprising, there's been an obvious shift in the programming, especially in major organizations like orchestras, and realizing that we exist and we're here and we have things to say. So I think I'm interested in when that happens in a way that is not a natural progression, or it's not something that has been at a pace that feels normal. It just feels like all of a sudden for some organizations. I'm interested in the conversations that we need to have about how can we make that sustainable and how we can best support artists to make the art they want to make. Not commission them to write about their trauma, not commission them to write something about being an artist of color. Having this openness that we have for other artists be the same for us. And I also want to talk more with colleagues about how do we make sure that once we're invited in places that have historically been excluding us, how we can make sure that we're treated with respect and that we can also find ways to invite other folks that haven't been invited in those spaces
Does it feel important to have teachers, mentors, and role models who share your background and heritage?
I think it's really important that faculties in universities, conservatories, and summer camps and programs, administration and organizations, I think it's really important that all of those look like the world we live in and that they reflect all the different perspectives and the different backgrounds of people. That's unfortunately not the case, and we are mostly in a white male-dominated culture, and so there's that lack of balance. It can have a lot of consequences for students and young artists when they enter into these spaces. And I think it's really important to have role models and teachers that share our background and heritage. At the same time, that is a small part of who we are as an artist. For some people it's bigger, for some people it's smaller, but it is not the totality of who we are as artists and as humans. So I think it's important to have the option, but at the same time, it's, for me at least, even more important to consider the multiplicity of identity and that there are many interests that people have, and that there are other factors that come into play when you are looking for a role model, or when you're looking for a mentor or a teacher, and that your heritage is an important part of that makeup, but it's just an element from that totality. And then finally, if I have any advice to give to aspiring artists or current artists in these times or in general, I would say make the work that you want to make. I know it sounds very simple, but for a long time I struggled with that. I was not making work that I wanted to listen to. I was making music the music that I thought other people wanted me to make. And I don't mean audiences, I mean mostly in school, just overthinking music that would be interesting to talk about, or that I could talk about the different operations I did to a certain group of notes or a scale, or the chord progression I used, or those things are obviously great technical resources and are also things that are really important for some composers, but not for everyone. I feel like finding the thing that feels right for you, the thing you're most excited about, and then pursuing that and trying your best to let go of all the voices that tell you otherwise, and never forget to have fun.
Thank you for listening to For Good Measure, and a special thank you to our guest, Angélica Negrón, for joining us today. If you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe to our podcast by clicking on the subscribe button, and support us by sharing it with your friends, posting about it on social media, and leaving us a rating and a review. To learn more about E4TT, our concert season online and in the Bay Area, or to make a tax-deductible donation, please visit us at www.e4tt.org. This podcast is made possible in part by a grant from the California Arts Council and generous donors like you. For Good Measure is produced by Nanette McGuinness and Ensemble for These Times, and designed by Brennan Stokes, with special thanks to audio engineer extraordinaire Stephanie Neumann. Remember to keep supporting equity in the arts, and tune in next week for Good Measure.